There are players we saw so often on the field that we never truly realized how important they were until the day they were gone. And suddenly, the team just didn't feel the same. The Ravens have always been known for strength, tactical intelligence, and a dominant defensive identity. But what rarely gets talked about is the quiet names behind all that greatness. The players who built this legacy without ever chasing the spotlight. The ones who were always there, fixing what no one else noticed, holding the team together in critical moments, and doing exactly what needed to be done, even if no one ever said it out loud. And the craziest part? A lot of fans went years without realizing just how valuable those names really were. Stay with me until the end, because you're about to discover the most underrated players in our history, and you'll finally understand why, without them, that greatness we've lived as fans might never have been possible. Go Ravens! You know that player who never makes it onto the posters, but earns the respect of every single guy in the locker room? That was Jarrett Johnson. When you think of the Ravens defense from the 2000s, it's easy to picture Ray Lewis and Ed Reed. But behind all those highlight reel plays was a guy doing the dirty work. No glamour, no microphones, just pure dedication. Johnson was that rare kind of player who didn't care about fame. He cared about results. He was the kind of linebacker who did everything right. He wasn't the fastest or the strongest, but he was always in the right place at the right time. A monster against the run, a hard hitter, a sharp play reader, and even capable of getting the quarterback when needed. And he did it all with the kind of discipline that made coaches smile. He was the engine of the defense. And every engine needs a solid piece to keep it running. Johnson played in Baltimore from 2003 to 2011, and during that whole time, you almost never heard him complain. He wasn't a guy giving interviews asking for more recognition. Quite the opposite. He let the field do the talking. In a team full of loud voices and huge personalities, Johnson was the silence that held up all the noise. And that's a lot harder than it sounds. To really understand his value, just look at how consistent that defense was. Year after year, the unit was solid, impenetrable, aggressive, and behind that was a group of players who bought into the system and gave everything they had, even without the promise of glory. Jarrett Johnson was the perfect example of that. He wasn't chasing stardom. He just wanted to win. And in Baltimore, that has always meant more than anything. What's wild is that even though he never made it to a Pro Bowl, every sharp Ravens fan knows this guy was something special. Many coaches called him the best player nobody knows. That says everything about who he was. On another team, maybe he would have stood out more. But with the Ravens, his shine was in consistency, the invisible work that pushed the defense forward without anyone noticing. In the end, Jarrett Johnson was one of the greatest reminders that not every hero wears a cape. Some just need a helmet, a purple jersey, and a mission to help the team win. If today the Ravens defense is legendary, part of that reputation belongs to him. He helped shape the identity, strength, humility, and total commitment to the team that still defines how Baltimore plays today. And speaking of players who made a difference quietly, there's another name fans often forget, someone who was essential in a position that almost no one talks about, the punter. It might sound strange to say this, but Sam Koch was one of the most important players in Ravens history. Yes, he was a punter, the guy who kicks the ball when the offense can't move the chains. But if you've been a Baltimore fan for a while, you know what he did was far more than just kick the ball downfield. He was a secret weapon, a true magician of the position. Koch changed the way teams think about punting in the NFL. What made Koch so special was his creativity. While other punters used the same type of kick all the time, he developed several different styles. He could make the ball bounce unpredictably, drop it exactly at the 1-yard line, kick it out of bounds, or pin the returner against the sideline. It was like watching a pool player on a football field, and he did it with almost surgical precision. That gave the Ravens a huge edge in many games. You know those matchups decided by 3 points? Or the ones where the offense struggled, but the defense held everything together? Koch was the one who made sure the opponent had the full field to go. That changes everything. He put the defense in a favorable position, rattled the opposing offense, and flipped the game on the margins. How many wins started with a perfectly placed punt? On top of that, Sam Coke was the kind of leader who didn't need to be loud. He was respected because he always delivered what the team needed. He played from 2006 to 2022 and hardly missed a game. He was reliable, consistent, and always ready to innovate. Even on fakes, those plays where the punter pretends to kick and throws the ball instead, he was spot on. John Harbaugh trusted him so much that many of those plays were designed specifically with Coke in mind. And you know what's even better? He helped train the next man up. When he retired, he became a mentor to Jordan Stout, the team's new punter. So his influence is still on the field, even after hanging up his cleats. Coke wasn't just a technical player. He helped build a culture. On a team that's always valued defense and field position, having a punter like him was a true treasure. Younger fans may not have caught his prime, but those who did know Sam Coke was the kind of player who made you pay attention to a punt. And that says everything. When even the fans stop to watch a punt, it's because the guy is doing something different. And Coke did it week after week, season after season, for over a decade. He was one of a kind. And since we're talking about reliable players, there's a wide receiver who was always there in the toughest moments, catching the ball when no one else could, Derek Mason. And have you ever stopped to think how much a punter can change the outcome of a game? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you also believe Sam Coke was one of the most underrated players in our history, or if you remember another punter who completely changed the way the team played, let's talk about it in the comments. Every Ravens fan who lived through the 2000s knows what Derek Mason meant to this team. He came to Baltimore in 2005, straight from our division rival, the Tennessee Titans. And right from the start, he proved he was different. At a time when the Ravens' offense was still crawling, Mason was a stabilizing force. He was the one quarterbacks looked to when things got tight. He became the primary target, even when double covered. Mason wasn't the tallest or the fastest, but he was smart, technical, and above all, reliable. He knew exactly where to be, how to position himself, and when to attack the ball. He wasn't just a receiver. He was almost like a professor on the field. He read defenses calmly, ran crisp routes, and rarely dropped a pass. He was the kind of player who made life easier for any quarterback. That was essential for a team still searching for a defensive identity. Remember when we went through Kyle Bowler, Anthony Wright, Steve McNair, and early Joe Flacco? All of them had Mason as an anchor. He was the guy who kept the offense breathing when nothing else was working. Sometimes the throw was off, the protection broke down, but Mason found a way. He always did. And it wasn't just on the field. Mason was a leader off it too. He had poise, spoke to the media when needed, and held the pressure in tense moments. He didn't run from responsibility. When the offense was criticized, he didn't point fingers. He owned it, trained harder, and asked for the ball. That earned him respect in the locker room. Young players learned from him, and veterans knew they could count on his full commitment. His numbers in Baltimore are impressive. Over 5,700 receiving yards and 29 touchdowns wearing the purple jersey. And still, many people forget just how clutch he was. He didn't dance, didn't ask for the camera, but every time the team needed a key gain, there was Mason in the middle of the field, securing the catch and saving the drive. That kind of player is pure gold on a developing team. What's most beautiful is that he truly embraced being a Raven. Even though he came from another AFC team, he gave it his all as if he had been drafted here. He connected with the fans, represented the Shield with honor, and helped lay the foundation for the offensive success that would come years later with Flacco and company. Derek Mason deserves to be remembered as one of the great pillars of this team's offensive turnaround. And speaking of unseen pillars, there's a name on defense that may have never been a star, but held down the front line like few others, the powerful Kelly Gregg. If you love defense, the kind of players who hit hard at the line of scrimmage and don't let the opponent gain even a single yard, then you need to remember Kelly Gregg. He was one of the most important names on the Ravens defense for nearly a decade. And even so, few people talked about him. He wasn't the type of player who appeared at the top of the stat sheets or made spectacular sacks. But if you paid attention to the defensive line, you knew he was a heart right there in the middle. Gregg played as a nose tackle, that position right at the center of the defensive line. taking hits from two blockers at once and still holding his ground. He was short for position, but made up for it with strength, technique, and an incredible read of the run game. It was nearly impossible to run up the middle with him there. The dirty work was his, and he did it like few others. It's easy to shine when you're free to chase a quarterback or intercept passes. But Greg did the most thankless job of all, creating space for the linebackers, absorbing blocks, occupying two guys, and still stopping the run. That allowed Ray Lewis to fly all over the field. A lot of people saw Lewis shining, but didn't realize that without Greg anchoring the line, none of that would have happened. He was a foundation that held everything up. And the most impressive thing is that he was extremely consistent. Game after game, year after year, Kelly Gregg did what the team needed. He never had a game with huge numbers. But if you watch the tape, you'd see him win his individual battle nearly every time. That's very hard to do in the NFL, especially for someone who wasn't even drafted at the start of his career. Gregg had to fight for everything he achieved. Even though he was low-key, he had total respect in the locker room. Coaches trusted him. Teammates knew he was essential. And opponents knew that running up the middle would be a problem with him on the field. He's the kind of player who might not sell jerseys, but makes any defense a top-5 unit for years on end. That's what Gregg was, a warrior in the middle of the trenches. In the end, Kelly Gregg represented everything that defines a Ravens identity. Tough defense, collective effort, and zero ego. He didn't want attention. He wanted results. And he delivered those results every week. If the Ravens shield stands for toughness and aggression, Gregg deserves to have his name etched in history for embodying those values on the field. And since we're talking about players who impacted the team even without being full-time starters, there's a running back who, even as a backup, kept the offense breathing with intelligence and consistency. Chester Taylor. By the way, we're already on the 5th topic. But before we continue, I noticed you haven't liked this video yet. That's really important so YouTube keeps recommending my content to you. That way, I'll keep bringing you the best Baltimore Ravens content out there. So go ahead and hit the like button. It's free. Thanks. Now let's continue. On a team like the Ravens, where defense was always a standout, having an efficient offense often depended on small pieces that kept the game under control. That's where Chester Taylor came in. He was never the number 1 running back on the team for long. But every time he was called upon, he delivered. No noise, no stardom. Taylor was the kind of guy who, before he even realized it, had racked up 80 yards and kept 3 drives alive. He arrived in Baltimore in 2002 as a 6th-round pick. There weren't high expectations around him, but he quickly showed he understood the game. He was fast, but what stood out most was his patience. He knew how to wait for blocks to develop, find the openings, and gain yards with intelligence. Even when the opposing defense knew he was going to run, he could still get something positive out of it. Taylor was also excellent catching passes, which made him even more valuable. That gave the Ravens offense a reliable option on short 3rd downs, those plays where the team only needs a few yards to keep the drive going. Having a running back who understands routes, secures the catch, and can break tackles is a gift for any offensive coordinator. And that's exactly what Taylor was. He helped keep the pace of the game steady. He was the kind of player who didn't let the offense completely stall. Even when the starter needed to rest or wasn't getting it done, Taylor would step in and carry the load. The stats didn't always reflect this clearly, but those who watched the full game, who felt the flow of the matchup, knew he was one of the key reasons the team stayed afloat. And the most interesting part is that he never complained about not being the starter. Even with plenty of talent, he accepted his role, worked quietly, and kept growing year after year. So much so that when he left the Ravens and went to Minnesota Vikings, he became a starter and rushed for over 1,000 yards a season. In other words, he was much more than a backup. He was a starter just waiting for the right opportunity, and Baltimore wisely took advantage of that for a long time. Chester Taylor was the kind of player who gave the team confidence. Fans might not remember a specific touchdown of his, but they definitely remember that feeling of few were moving the ball. He was a quiet engine of the offense, the one who kept the clock ticking and gave the defense time to rest. And on a team that depended so much on its defense, that was more important than most people realized. And if we're talking about someone who kept the offense moving, We also need to talk about the one who held everything down in the back of the secondary, the reliable and clutch Dawan Landry. In a defense full of superstar names, Dawan Landry may have flown under the radar for many. But anyone who closely followed the Ravens secondary between 2006 and 2010 knows just how essential he was. He played alongside Ed Reed, arguably the greatest safety in history, and still managed to leave his mark with intelligence, toughness, and an impressive ability to make sound decisions under pressure. Landry entered the NFL in 2006 as a fifth-round pick. No one expected him to become a starter right away, but that's exactly what happened. And not just a starter, he was a dependable piece from his very first snap. Unlike Reed, who was a creative genius of the secondary, Landry was a guy who kept everything under control. He did the clean work, filled the right gaps, and almost never missed an assignment. The more attentive fans will remember that, even as a strong safety, a role that requires more physical impact than flashy interceptions, Landry racked up 5 picks in his rookie year. That shows he wasn't just brute strength. He understood the game. He could read the quarterback's eyes, anticipate routes, and most importantly, finish plays with authority. No letting the opponent slip away. He was also incredibly solid against the run. It wasn't uncommon to see Landry flying into the line of scrimmage to stop the running back before the play even developed. That kind of presence gave other defenders room to shine. He covered gaps, corrected mistakes, and prevented big plays. He was like the bumper of the defense. Whatever slipped through the others, stopped with him. What made Landry special was the way he understood the system. He knew exactly what Rex Ryan or Greg Madison wanted when calling a blitz or when the coverage needed to shift at the last second. He was the kind of player you could trust to keep the structure intact. And in a defense that was already extremely aggressive, that stability was crucial to avoid losing control of the game. That's why, even without being a star on paper, Landry earned respect inside the locker room and among coaches. He was part of the backbone of that historic defense. When he left the Ravens, his absence was felt. He left behind a void of responsibility and reliability that couldn't easily be filled. And that says a lot about the value he brought, even without media hype. And if Landry was a symbol of security on the back end, we close this list by remembering a linebacker who made up for what he lacked in size with pure heart and intelligence. The warrior Bart Scott. And if you've made it this far, drop a comment. Landry was the invisible wall of the defense. That way I'll know you're one of the few who truly appreciated those who held it down without needing the spotlight. Let's keep going. Bart Scott wasn't a hype name, far from one of those players who entered the NFL with fanfare and high expectations. He wasn't drafted. He was just another guy trying to survive among giants. But in Baltimore, he found the right place. It was here that he turned every second on the field into a chance to prove he belonged. And he did. Scott became a respected name across the league, not just for how he played, but for everything he represented. He started with the Ravens in 2002, practically an unknown. He was part of special teams, learning from the veterans, watching and waiting. Slowly, he started to stand out with an aggressive, smart, and determined approach. By 2006, when he finally got his shot as a starter, there was no ignoring him anymore. He racked up 103 tackles, 9.5 sacks, and made a direct impact in almost every game. He wasn't just ready, he was already a core part of the defense. Scott made up for any physical limitations with football IQ and dedication. He studied opponents obsessively. He knew what was coming before the snap, anticipated moves, cut off paths, and showed up in the right place at the right time. He was a cerebral linebacker, the kind who understood defense like a chessboard. That tactical intelligence became one of his trademarks, making him indispensable, even while sharing the field with legends like Ray Lewis. But what truly defined Bart Scott was his fiery personality. He was explosive, provocative, passionate. He didn't shy away from confrontation, never avoided the microphone, and never disappeared in tough moments. He was a spark that lit the fire in the group, the player who said what needed to be said and inspired others with his intensity. When he was on the field, everyone knew it, teammate or opponent. The Ravens' identity has always been built on a defense that is aggressive, physical, and proud. Bart Scott fit that mold perfectly. He didn't just follow the culture, he fueled it. He was the kind of player who refused to be just another number, who wore the shield with pride, and turned every snap into a cry for respect. He became an extension of Baltimore's mentality, tough, direct, and relentless. Even after his departure to the Jets in 2009, his impact remained. The way he carried himself in the locker room, his commitment, and the respect he earned through pure effort are remembered to this day. He's living proof that you don't have to be born a star to become unforgettable. All it takes is courage, a sharp mind, and the willingness to fight for every inch, every single day. That makes it clear how overlooked players helped shape the greatness of the Ravens. They may not be the faces on the posters, but they were the foundation of historic victories and a winning culture that still stands today. With everything we've seen, one thing is clear. These players were the invisible backbone that upheld the greatness of the Ravens. They weren't celebrities, they didn't win individual awards, but they were there in the toughest moments and the most iconic victories. They were loyal, consistent, and decisive. The kind of players who shape a team's identity without ever asking for anything in return. And even without the recognition they deserved, they gave everything while wearing the purple jersey. The real question is, how many other names like these are still forgotten in our own history? If you also believe these players deserve to be remembered, honor their stories and share them with those who lived it all with you. And get ready. This was only part one. There are many more names who made history behind the scenes, and we're going to talk about them all.
And if you, just like me, are passionate about the world of football and want to learn more about the Ravens' legacy, don't leave this video without sharing it with that friend who is also a Baltimore Ravens fan and will love this content. See those video suggestions on your screen? The first one was handpicked just for you, and the other is a recommendation from YouTube itself. See you there, and until the next video, go Flock.